way.
Right. Facebook police.
And we are live.
I think I walk into the Home Depot bathroom and see if they
Ted?
Ready?
Ready. You wanna introduce yourself real quick?
All right, my name is Ted Dietrich. I work for United Refrigeration. I've been in the industry 16 when I got into it. I'm 51 now, so do the math there. But worked for a wholesaler for probably the last 30 years. I've worked with some different wholesalers. I used to work for Sid Harvey, where I met Myron and Tommy. But the last 23 years I've been with United Refrigeration. And what's nice about working for United is that the owner that owns us actually owns a refrigerant company and an oil company. So they actually make, they don't make any oil, they buy oil. That's it. They just buy it in tankers, comes in and they repackage it. There's only a few manufacturers that actually make oil, to be honest with you, whether it's vacuum pump oil, compressor oil, whatever it may be. So the refrigerant side of things, there are a lot of refrigerants they actually buy from the manufacturers, but there also is refrigerant they actually manufacture themselves. So they will buy the key components into it and make the blends such as 407, any 407A, 407C, 134A, 410. They manufacture that all themselves. We also have recovery, so when you guys do recovery on units, there is a process to bringing it back to us. It's not really hard or anything like that. It's just we have certain regulations on what takes we want back and things like that. So we'll go into that a little bit. But so basically, Tommy's having me here today for refrigerant and oil information. So basically, I know I gave you a bunch of different information, but probably one of the best bits of information is this chart right here. This chart, it gives you a couple different things that are really nice. It breaks it first up, breaks it into what class of refrigerant is, whether it's an HFC, CFC, HFC, HFO, that kind of thing. It also will tell you the makeup of the refrigerant. So if you look, take 404A, actually tells you the percentage and the actual makeup. So it's R125, 143A, and 134A. And it gives you the percentages, tells you the cylinder size that it's available in, also tells you the type of oil, and then the application of it. And then at the very bottom, it's going to tell you what it's going to be replacing, if it is replacing something. So it's a real handy chart to have if you don't know what gas you're dealing with. You can look at the chart, basically just say, you know, hey, it's a R12 replacement, or it's a R22 replacement, or something like that. So really handy bit of information to have. I do have a bigger one for you, Tom, if you want to put some around or whatever. I got more of all this literature if you guys do want to need more. I know I inundated you a little bit with it, but that's probably the best one to start with. So refrigerants as a whole. If you guys are mainly come from the air conditioning world, it's been really new the last couple of years for you, because you're basically looking at new refrigerants, new gauges, new pressures, all that kind of stuff to deal with. Refrigeration guys have done this years ago. So if you've done refrigeration, you've dealt with the 134A initially, which was the R12 replacement. It was a replacement from the standpoint that the equipment that was replacing, so a piece of brand new R134A equipment could actually replace an R12 system. You could not take 134A and put it into an R12 compressor. Okay, there are a bunch of stipulations and reasons why. Basically, briefly, first and foremost, the oil. The oil is not compatible. Next thing is you may not have the condenser to actually process that refrigerant. Expansion valves or cap tubes. The cap tubes are different. The expansion valves usually just take an adjustment. So it really wasn't too much of a factor there if you were replacing a whole compressor sled. Pretty easy changeover for you. They do recommend flushes if you're going to anything that is going to take POE oil. So basically everything that we're dealing with from, you know, back in the 90s, going from 134A and going forward, all of these new brands of refrigerant, all these new, replacements and interim refrigerants, if you will, they're pretty much all POE based. So we're pretty used to that. We'll talk about oils in a little bit, but like I said, there's a small little pamphlet on retrofitting, and basically, essentially what it's saying is, and this is for the R22 side of things, whether it's air conditioning or refrigeration. So if you have 22 now, currently, what do you swap to? So we get this question every single day. And it's got some things that you really have to take into consideration. Number one, is it a residential air conditioner? If it's a residential air conditioner, your best bet would be 422B. The reason why is because up to 5 ton, you're gonna lose very little capacity. The old compressor that was in there, assuming that it's got a little bit of age, it's gonna have mineral oil in it. 422B runs on mineral oil, so there's no changeover. Now, if you have somebody that has an air conditioner and that compressor goes out, the compressor going forward that you're gonna get, whether it's a Copeland or a Danfoss or whoever compressor manufacturer it may be, the last probably 5 years now, most of them have all been coming with POE. So the thing is, if you're changing out the compressor, you can stay with R22, because R22 and POE work fine together. You could go to 422B, because it can run on POE as well, or you could go to 407C. So in our opinion, the best bet, if there's POE oil in the compressor, make the change to 407 and be done with it. I mean, if that unit is gonna stay there. If it's a residential air conditioner, it's gonna be replaced, you're going to 410, no questions, if, ands, or buts about it. That's your choice on it. So, like I say, this little bit just tells you some of the brief fine points of 422, of 22, and 407. Our company, United Refrigeration, we actually chose 422B. The reason why we chose 422B over some of the other ones that are out there was that it had the widest manufacturer acceptance, especially from Copeland. Copeland pushes the market. If Copeland says it's okay, everybody else is gonna go, yep, Copeland said it's okay, it's fine, we're gonna go with that. So they kind of set the standard in what's going on in the market. The other thing is, some of the other ones that came out, they had really limited supply. The manufacturers basically said, we'll make X amount of pounds per year or over the course of what we feel that this refrigerant is gonna be an interim replacement for 22. One of the other really popular ones was 421. So I don't know if you guys have run into that or not. Right now, it is in really short supply from what we're hearing. The caveat with 421 is that if you're replacing R22, if you have a vertical lift of 10 foot or more, you have to change the oil to POE. Now, most wholesalers that I know of are not really telling people that, just because either they haven't read it or they just assume that nothing, if you're replacing 421, it's gonna go into a residential air conditioner and off you go. But there's a lot of refrigeration systems out there using R22. A lot of them have a vertical lift of 15 foot or, whatever the case may be. So our stance was, when we look at 421 and 422, because those kind of rose to the top, the reason why we ended up choosing the 422 was because of the POE issue. Like, if you're going to change to POE, you might as well make the change again to 407C. It's a more efficient refrigerant. It's got a lot of market acceptance as opposed to this interim R22 replacement. So for us, like I said, 422B really kind of outshined all the rest of them that were out there and that were available. So, like I said, right now, again, I know some of the other suppliers, they either don't have it, or if you want a can, you're gonna get 1 can, and that is it. So, all these people that decided to jump on that 421 bandwagon, they're having to come over to 422 now at this point. Pressure-wise, they're about the same. You're really not gonna notice a whole lot of difference between 421 and 422. 407, there is a little bit of a pressure difference. excuse me, it's not a crazy pressure difference. If you have systems that are 5 ton and over, that's probably going to be your best bet, especially on large split systems or large 20-ton units or something like that. And the reason why is because the 421 and 422, they all have a high glide. So basically, that fractionation point of when it's going to become inefficient is very high. So because it becomes inefficient at a higher temperature, the higher you go in tonnage, the more capacity loss you're going to have. So that capacity loss on a 20-ton system, some of these, not 422 or 421, but some of them out there, like 439 and some of these other really kind of crazy ones that, you know, some off brands are pushing or off kind of suppliers are pushing. Some of those can actually be as much as 15 to 20%. So you're talking on a 20-ton system. If it was sized marginally to begin with, and now you're going to lose capacity on it.
Are we talking about the 407?
Not 407, no. 421, 422. Those kind of intermediate blends, if you will. The 407A, 407C, 407C being the air conditioning replacement. That one is more of a mainstay refrigerant. I know it's new to us over the last, say, 8 or 10 years. That has been used over in Europe for 20 years. They've already moved well past that. We are still in the midst, we're still in the midst of, you know, dealing with 407. So there's going to be a lot of changes coming forward in the future. A lot of it is pushed through political avenues, how Congress looks at things, how certain states look at things. So the market right now for what replacements are out there, it's kind of limited, and your choice may be pushed by what equipment is actually available. I'm sure everybody knows right now, as you're calling more and more suppliers, equipment is becoming hard to get. You know, there's people out there that if you don't buy a complete system from you, they're not going to piecemeal it. They're not going to sell you an A-coil. They're not going to sell you a condensing unit, and that's just the way that it is. So equipment is really in short supply. COVID has pushed obviously a lot of things. You know, we're routinely now hearing, like, on the refrigeration end of things, Heatcraft, which is Bone, Larkin, Chandler, Climate Control, under that whole umbrella. We got a notice probably sometime in April saying that they were pushing small reach-in evaporators out to 176-day lead time. So motors, I mean, I had a guy call today for 4 motors. I had to get him from 4 different locations around the United States just to get him those 4 motors that he needed today. Manufacturers were pushing price increases. Heatcraft again, they just pushed through, I think it's been the 4th or 5th price increase this year alone, because of all the raw material goods are going up. And they're actually trying to control, a lot of things are actually trying to control by price as well. Like this rise in refrigerant pricing, a lot of that is being pushed by what they want you to use. So R22 has gone sky high. So you look at a tank of refrigerant on R22, you're anywhere from $800 to $1,200 probably on that market right now for R22. Do you really think they want you using it at that price? There's other alternatives to use, and like I say, these 3 are probably your most rock solid ones, and again, it's going to depend on application. So
do you see any end to, not the 22, but the supply chain? I mean,
Yeah.
Is there anything, as it get, like lumber came back down and stuff, is there anything like next year, like March or April, it's gonna get better?
They're really not calling, like Heatcraft again, they're not really giving us too much information as far as what they're feeling the market is doing, because they're so reliant on certain products like steel. They've been sourcing steel from different products. Now the problem with that is, as a manufacturer, if you didn't buy from me before, what's the chances if you buy now, you're gonna continue to buy when all this is all said and done? You're gonna go back to your supplier. So those suppliers wanna keep what they have for their customers that they sell to on a regular basis. So that pushes that. As far as cost of refrigerants, cost of product, is it gonna come down? Absolutely, it's all gonna start coming down. When and to what point, it's anybody's guess, it really is. Will R22 come down?
No, that's gone.
R22 is probably not gonna come
Can you
down.
still get 12?
I'm sorry.
12 came back down, didn't it?
No. 12 has hit like a $1,200 price mark, just about.
Still back.
And it's been there for a really long time. 502, I mean, when was the last time anybody used 502? But even 408, which was a replacement for 502. That replacement market, it's just not there. I mean, we still have it available. I mean, if you guys need a tank R12, give me a call, I'll get you one, it's not a problem. Take a 502, take a 502, whatever it might be. I mean, we still have all that in the network. It's in our chain, you know? I mean, we may sit on it from now until it just doesn't make sense for us to pay tax on it anymore.
Dust on the bottom?
Yeah, there's always dust on the bottom. But, is, you know, 134A and 410 gonna start coming down? Yeah. The reason why it's up so high, if nobody has really told anybody about it, there's a key component, and if you look on that chart, you'll actually see the fold-out, the two-piece fold-out chart on refrigerants. If you look on there, there's a key component, it's called R32. They're really short supply in R32, so it's drove everything up, everything. So, there was a plant fire at one of the refrigerant plants. There was another plant that was already slated to be shut down. Instead of trying to keep it open to start producing some of these other refrigerants, it was already it was already set up to shut down, so we're just gonna shut it down. That's just the way that it is. You know, the plants are getting shut down because of EP regulations. I mean, that's still something we have to deal with, you know, it's like the recovery, you know, so, is it our industry that's actually creating this ozone hole? They've pretty much found out that it is a portion of us as an industry, but there are so many other factors that go into it. Does the hole get larger and smaller over time? Yes, it does. I mean, you know, jets going, you know, into the air create ozone. So, if that's the case, if we've increased air traffic over the last 25 years, then why isn't the ozone layer, or that ozone hole, getting smaller? Because it's the Earth's burp mechanism, really. You know, when it needs to vent more, it basically does what it needs to do. So, that's basically the reason why, like I say, a lot of that refrigerant is kind of playing that game right now. So one of the other things, I don't know if you guys are aware, but this little thing right here basically says all refrigerant, no more colors. They're getting rid of all of the colors on all the gas. So if you're used to grabbing a 404 because it's orange, you're really gonna have to look at it now. The boxes can still be colored, but the tanks themselves, they're not gonna be colored anymore. The reasoning behind it is because as an industry, they basically said they run out of colors. My take on it is, you just don't want to pay for all these different colors of paint. You know, they're kind of done and tired with it. So if they can paint everything one color and buy tons and tons and tons of that paint as opposed to 5 different paints, you're going to get a better price. So it's kind of, it's my feeling on it, it's our feeling on it as a company. So everything is just going to be identified by the refrigerant, whether it's 22, 404, 134A. And if you haven't seen them or got a tank yet, they're basically like kind of like a light grayish or an off-white kind of color, something like that. So, that's.
But plainly labeled, right?
I'm sorry?
Plainly labeled.
Yeah, it will be, like I said, again, it's gonna come in a box. That box can still be colored. So any new refrigerants going forward, excuse me, whether they continue to put out a color for some of these, I don't know if that's gonna happen. I mean, there's already redundancies in colors.
If you don't have a color, you should have a big number on there.
Yeah, again, like I say, the tanks, if you look, the tanks will be labeled with a number
Okay.
on the tank. So if you take it out of the box and you put it into a rack, just spin the tank and take a look and see what number's on it. I mean, it's not really too hard there. But the boxes will be colored for the foreseeable future. Right now, National says they're still gonna continue to make an orange 404 box, green 22, blue 134A, and so on. So that's really not gonna be going away right now. But it's kind of a big shocker for people. I mean, I actually have people coming in and asking, hey, if I get a 404, do you have some of the orange ones still? Is it a better flavor if it's got orange or something?
It's called Duplicolor at Home Depot, man.
It just doesn't matter, but, you know, I mean, there's people out there that get kind of freaky about that kind of stuff, so. But, so going along with the R22 discussion, there is a separate pamphlet on retrofit guideline for 422. So this will basically walk you through, on the back is the retrofit guide. It basically walks you through a retrofit. I'm sure all you guys have done retrofits. There's nothing really new there. We're not telling you anything earth-shattering, but it's there and it's in print and you can refer to it if you need to. The nice thing is it does give you a little TP chart on the front. I did give all you guys a TP chart as well as most everybody has smartphones today. If you go into your App Store or Google Play Store, if you go to refrigerant, just put in National Refrigerant or refrigerants.com, or I actually do have a little QR code type thing up here. You can scan it and download it. The nice thing about that is you can, I believe, I don't know if they've made any revisions since the last time I used it, but you used to be able to put in your pressure and it would automatically calculate temperature for you. If not, I know the Danfoss one does that. If you guys are not familiar with that one as well. Yeah, it's got a slider and you know, I mean, it's got some different features to it. So the nice thing about the charts on your smartphone is obviously they're updated just like an app is at any point in time. If there's any change for whatever reason or refrigerants added, they're always going to be added to that app. So even though I gave you TP charts, they're kind of a little bit antiquated, but guys still like to flip them open and look and see what they want. So those are there for you. The national ones have just about every refrigerant, either that we sell or pretty much that's out there. I mean, obviously there's going to be some options that you're not going to see on there, and you're going to have to refer to a chart like this, or if you go to refrigerants.com, they're probably going to have it, which is National Refrigerants website. So that is the 422 portion of it. So this one, all these single charts, they're all these like retrofit guideline, but this one, I kind of want to make you guys aware of. This is a new refrigerant called 513. 513 is going to be replacing 134A. So a lot of you guys thought 134A was safe. It's not. Sorry, it's just not anymore.
Safe about it.
But someone.
Oh, you mean like safe from being eliminated?
Well, yeah, safe as far as the global warming potential. I mean, that's the word we all have to use, is the global warming potential as opposed to the ozone depletion ratio. The ozone depletion ratio was the original, when they came up with the Montreal Protocol. That number that they gave all the refrigerants on that ozone depletion ratio was how they basically said, these are the refrigerants we're gonna start getting rid of, and in what order. The problem with that is that didn't satisfy exactly what they thought it was gonna do. So what they ended up doing was they reassessed the whole entire situation. They ended up coming out with the global warming potential. Problem with the global warming potential is this. Refrigerants that they already said were really bad according to that ozone depletion ratio were not that bad on the global warming potential.
Compared to the
Main
new
example.
refrigerants, yeah.
Main example, R22.
Yeah.
I mean, if they could redo their thoughts on R22, we'd still be using R22 and there really wouldn't be an issue. But it was already slated to go and it's gone. So, as far as that kind of information, I apologize. I'm gonna look at my phone just because I've got some of this information on here because I can't remember all of these things. You start looking at some of these numbers and it's staggering. So I don't want to inundate you with numbers, but I do want to say this. Like I said, again, all the refrigerants look at global warming potential as opposed to the ozone depletion ratio. So they give it a number, okay? So your highest number that's out there, your highest number that's out there is R23. R23 is the worst. That was the first one they got rid of. That number, and again, this is just a number, I'm just gonna throw it out there, but I'll show you the difference, okay? So that number for R23 is 14,800. Ammonia is 0. So everything falls in between 14,800 and 0. So as a baseline, where they want to go to, what they're really pushing for, governmental-wise, lawmaker-wise, California-wise, the number that they want is 150. So again, that number means nothing to anybody, but if you think about this, okay, R22 that we're so used to, and the reason why it's going away, is that its GWP number is 1800. Now, the thing about that is, the 407 that's replacing it, that number is actually higher on the GWP. Actually is higher. So again, that's one of those ones that if they could do it all over again and look at just GWP and revise any laws that they've done to get rid of refrigerant, that would be the first one they would bring back. But they've already forced it, they've already gone to it, they've already had their replacements, this is what we're going to. So the difference, excuse me, the difference between 407 as a number and R22 as a number. Again, R22 being 1800, 407 is about, I think it's about 2300. So you can see it's not a huge difference, but again, to the people that have the numbers, it does really mean something. And again, they want to get down to that 150. I mean, that's where they're shooting for. What does the refrigerant market look like that we're going to end up going to? Don't know really. I mean, because every time it seems like they develop a refrigerant, it just doesn't fit that 150 number. So what they do is they start kind of trying to go, okay, well, this is really good for now, and we want people to start using this because we're lowering it from what we were using. We're on the right track. We're just going to keep on going this way.
Just like R22.
Yeah. So, so you have 448, which is this one. 448, and there's another one in there, it's called 449. Both of those are replacing 404. So 404, like I said, it's not safe in that GWP number. So they come out with these refrigerants. So basically, the difference between 448 and 449, and it's on that chart if you look, the percentage of what gases they're using are a little changed. And it's Ford and Chevy, if you will. One manufacturer came out with 448, one manufacturer came out with 449. They both hit all the manufacturers really, really, really hard to try and sell their refrigerant. And it seems that 448 may be the one winning out right now, it seems. We don't know. But 404 is 1387 on that GWP number. 448 is like 630 or 687. So it's like half. But it's way over, again, this 150 magic number that they really feel that they need to be in. 410.
Anything that's 150?
Well, yeah, I mean, you have, again, ammonia,
Yeah.
0. 290 is like 4.
Oh.
You guys are seeing 290 equipment out there.
Yeah.
We'll kind of get into that.
What's propane?
290.
Propane, I think, is like 1 or 2.
Aldi's has propane in their coolers.
Yeah, it's, I mean, it is a common thing. You know, since we're going basically into that direction, you know, like 290, that propane type cylinder, okay? The regulation in the United States is their unit, any unit they manufacture cannot go over or exceed 5.3 ounces.
3 cigarette lighters.
It's a very small amount, it really, really is.
Is that what it is?
You open it up, and I mean, it pisses out immediately. I mean, you can take a flame, an open flame, cut the line, and it's basically gonna be like a flash of flame, and then it's done. But they don't want you doing that. I mean, there's all kinds of guidelines about, you know, You don't have to recover it, you don't have to recover it, but you do have to take the precautions when working with it. So, when you're working with it, technically, you're supposed to have a combustible gas leak detector in the cabinet, or one around you at all times if it's in a back room or something like that. You know, because if it's gonna go off, it's gonna be that initial leak, it's gonna dissipate, and you're gonna be done with it. As far as making any type of repairs on a 290, what they recommend is bullet piercing valves, because they don't want those valves left on there. So what they recommend is put a bullet pierce on there, make your repair, pinch it behind it, pull it off, cut that piece off and braze it up. That's what they're recommending you do. So that's kind of 290 in a nutshell. There is a separate sheet on 290. There's nothing really to be afraid of with 290. I mean, yeah, okay, it is propane, it is flammable, but under most conditions, or under a lot of conditions, most of the refrigerants we deal with in some way can be a flamethrower.
Most people think though that the propane has an odor. Refrigerant 290 does not.
No, they put no scent
No
or anything like that.
odor.
So the cans you get from us, and this may vary by wholesaler, but the cans you get from us, they're going to be a 14-ounce can. You're going to use a different set of gauges, is what they recommend. Because they do have some higher pressure you're gonna deal with. Can you get away with the standard set of gauges? Yes. Can you go from 290 over to a 134A system using those same gauges? Yeah, you can.
It's all, you know, you will, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's not really a concern, it's not really a worry. The thing that you really gotta be concerned about is you can't use your standard 3-foot, 4-foot, 5-foot, 6-foot hoses. There's a really small hose set that you're gonna buy. Your options are, at least through us, your options are an 8-inch, 12-inch, or an 18-inch. And they're actually thermoplastic hose. So they're actually a plastic hose, and the diameter is very small. I mean, it's like 3/16 maybe, something like that you're dealing with. So you want as limited amount of charge in those hoses because you want it all going into that system. Every manufacturer will actually tell you that our system holds, 3.4 pounds or 3.4 ounces. All the manufacturers are gonna have that stamped on their identifier tag. So, we actually partnered with another company, it's not on here, and I didn't bring a whole bunch of stuff besides the literature, I apologize, but, the 290, it does have a screw top on it. We do sell a valve that screws onto it, and you hook up the thermoplastic hoses from your gauges and onto the system. The best way to do it is we actually, and I don't wanna make this a sales pitch, so don't get me wrong, okay guys, but we sell a scale that the can screws right onto the scale. You zero it out, it's got a little hose that you can put over to the system. You put it in by tear weight, and you're done. I mean, it's pretty simple.
It's a dial a charge.
It kind of is in a way,
A little heater in it.
Yeah.
But, so getting back to the whole, refrigerant, what's the outlook and all that kind of stuff. Fortunately or unfortunately, there are 25 states that have banded together at this point that have created I think it's called the, I did write this down because it's kind of.
People getting used to hot and bothered.
It's called the U.S. Climate Alliance. 25 different states belong to this. More are looking at it. So it could be across the United States in another year, 5 years, who knows? I mean, we really don't know. The thing I can say about this is, whatever these states are really choosing, the government is seriously looking at, and what they're pushing toward at this point is, the EPA will now end up becoming the governing body of what is mandated. So, may not seem like much, but the problem is, if you think about it, when we started recovering years ago, most wholesalers were taking it back, and then they ended up finding that it was a really big inconvenience, so they stopped doing it. they'll, you know, you come in and you go, hey, I gotta make this repair on this unit, and I gotta get some more refrigerant from you, so they'll sell you the tank of refrigerant, they'll sell you the recovery tank. When you put any refrigerant into that recovery tank, and you bring it back to most wholesalers, they want nothing to do with it. EPA is the one that forced us to recover as an industry. They forced us to recover. But they don't want to do anything for us to help us out. They, you know, like there's e-check centers. There's no recovery centers around there for us to go to, take your recovery tank, let them suck it out, and you're done with it. You take it back to wholesalers. So the problem with this now is that you have cylinder manufacturers, and there's really only a couple, 2, 3, 4 of them. They can't get steel. They have people out still. Other things that they're waiting for, like valve seals, all this kind of stuff, not in supply chain. So guess what? Recovery tanks. I've got 0 in my building.
Yeah, I know.
None. None.
Wanna buy one?
And we as a company, we developed a tank because we saw some things in the future kind of coming down. So we actually developed a tank. Some of you guys may have seen it, used it. There's really mixed emotion on it, but I'm not quite sure why. Basically, like I said, one of the guys at our plant started seeing this thing with the whole recovery units going out in waves, and then nothing comes back. And then they go out in waves, and nothing comes back. So now all of a sudden, these waves that are going out, there's very little to pull from over here at a supply, us, but we got plenty of tanks out there. So at one time, they did a survey, they actually looked at how many tanks we as in United Refrigeration purchased. 50 pounders, we had over 38,000 cylinders purchased. They could only account for about 17 of them.
People are
18 of
sitting
them.
on their 22.
People, well, it was before that even. It was before that. The problem was that it's like a recovery tank. You make a recovery, and you know they got other equipment. You know where you're going to end up doing something. You just take the cylinder, you set it down, you come back, and the next time it's there, and you use it again. When is that cylinder going to come back to us? Never. We have no idea. It may be never. It could be in a month from now. Who knows? But that's what would happen. All of a sudden, you would get this wave of cylinders coming back. So after we just went and purchased another 20,000 cylinders, so now we got 58,000 cylinders. We can only account for about 38 to 40,000 of them. We still have this thing that's out, and now they start sending them back out again. So it's just this recycling thing that just, it's really hard to keep a handle on. We buy all of our cylinders through Worthington Cylinder, just who we set up. We got a good relationship with them. They are running 3 shifts around the clock, nonstop, and they can't keep up. The cylinders that we're making now are not just for us, they're for many industries, obviously, but they cannot keep up. So like I said, we're at this point where it's a shortage. So like I said, some years ago, a guy at our plant decided that he was gonna try and solve the problem maybe, see what he could come up with. So what he did was he actually welded 2 top halves of a standard refrigerant cylinder.
Yeah, I've seen it.
He welded them together, and then he started, you know, kind of playing around and doing some different things. And what he came up with was, they put a check valve, a one-way check valve, on the top and on the bottom. So there's only one valve on the top and there's one valve on the bottom. Now everybody freaks out because, where's the other valve on the top? I always have 2 valves. There's still 2 valves there. It's pretty easy to use. But the check valve is the big sticking point. So what the check valve actually does is, when we give you the tank is open atmosphere. When you thread it down and you close that tank off, and then you open it back up, what happens internally is there is stress put onto like a little plastic hourglass kind of looking thing, and it snaps. So what happens is if you put any refrigerant into that tank, you close it down, you open it back up, you can take anything back out of it. You try putting refrigerant back into it, and it pushes a seal down and won't let you put anything more into it. So from a recovery standpoint, you guys are used to opening up valves, opening them up, closing them up. Doesn't work that way with these. Now, it can work that way with these, because what you can do is, you can put a ball valve hose, or even just a ball valve.
Buy the 5-inch whip with the ball valve.
Yeah, and you can shut the tank, leave the valve. What most guys do, we found, is they'll shut the valve on the bottom off. Just leave it, they're done. They'll recover through the top, they'll use the ball valve, and they'll recover into that tank. They'll shut it on and off by the ball valve.
As long as the hose doesn't fail, you're good.
Yeah, but
When it sits around for 12, 15, 22 years.
In the back of your truck.
who's it? But, so basically, we're trying to get Worthington to pump these cylinders out as quickly as they can. And again, we're having problems. So you guys, if you're not seeing it now, you probably will start seeing it. So it's becoming an issue in the industry. Just be aware of it, that's all I'm saying. And another thing, whether you're dealing with us for refrigerant, bringing it back or not, do not ever mix refrigerant.
Oh, yeah.
I know that sounds stupid, and I know everybody goes, yeah, you never do that, but you know what? It's on a Friday, you got this last job, and it's a different refrigerant from that tank.
You know where to put it, because there's no tanks.
You're gonna pop it in there. The problem with it, from our standpoint, is you're mixing chemicals that can now not be separated. Now, if there's acid in the tank because that last job was a burnout, or the last job had moisture in it, that actually can be extracted. There are scrubber units that we have at our plants that can take that refrigerant, run it through these absorption scrubber type units, and basically they will test it at the end of it. And if it tests back to that ARI 700 spec, which is the spec for recovered recycled refrigerant, has to meet a certain purity level, that refrigerant now is considered virgin refrigerant. So if you bought tanks from most suppliers, chances are you're getting a mixture of some used gas somewhere along the line. It's not a big deal. It's been brought back to the spec. It doesn't really matter. But it's just a little known fact that we just don't really talk about because it doesn't really matter. But mixing it into that cylinder renders those gases useless now. So staying in that same vein, you have an R22 system. R22's, $800, $900. You're gonna help these people out, stay cheap. You're gonna top it off with 421, 422, 439, 453. I mean, the list goes on and on of those replacements. You're gonna top it off. So it's only a little bit, right? It'll do the job. I'll top it off. It'll be okay. What you just created is an unknown refrigerant. In any quantity, when you start cocktailing or mixing or whatever anybody wants to call it, you're creating a new refrigerant. So pressures, we get calls from people, hey, these pressures are doing this. It's like, it's 404, but is condensables in the system? No, I pulled a really good vacuum. Okay, so you pulled all the refrigerant out of that system, put it into a recovery tank. Was the recovery tank empty? Yeah, it was empty. Okay. Were you the last one to work on it then? Because if you weren't, and you don't know what gas is in there, the only thing I can tell you is, if you guys don't know what gas is in there, the only thing you can really do, there's a couple things. Yeah, you can take it all out and put brand new gas in there. It's one option. Two is, leave the system off, put your gauges on there, take a pressure temperature correlation, see if it fits what's supposed to be in there at that temperature. Yeah. In worst case scenario is, come to a supplier, you buy a refrigerant sample cylinder, put a little bit in there, you send it off, and they'll tell you what's in there. So those are your real options with it. So again, like I say, I can't tell you how many times that we get calls from people that, like, hey, is it okay just to top this off with this when it was that? No, never. It's never okay to do that. You, like I said, you've created a new mixture of refrigerant. It's going to expand differently in the condenser and in the evaporator. Because if you think about it, if it's you turn the valve and it's pure gas coming out, pure liquid, it is in a state where it has not fractionated. It has not separated. The components of the 2, 3, 4 refrigerants, or 4 chemicals that went in to make that refrigerant, they have not separated. They're pure at that point. when are they not pure in a system? Condenser and the evaporator.
Klein.
When it changes state.
When it changes state, exactly. So where does that happen? I mean, if you look at the chart, you know, like you look at one of these gases, all right, so 125, if we're looking at 422, it takes, I'm reading upside down, my eyes are not very, so, no, that's all right. Let's say 125, right? 125 and 134A. Do those both expand and contract at the same? Does anybody know? I mean, none of us are chemical engineers, we don't know. So if your leak is in the condenser or the evaporator, and you're gonna top off, hope it works. Really do hope it works. You know, because your pressures are probably gonna end up being really wonky. I mean, who knows what's gonna happen with those pressures? So like I said, we get calls on this stuff all the time, so just be aware of where these leaks are in a system.
Well, that brings up a good question, is if you've got a refrigerant with a glide and it's subject to fractionization, and let's say that the unit held 30 pounds and it's 15 pounds low, we pull out what's left, we know it's what refrigerant it is, but it may not have the same temperature pressure correlation anymore than what happens when we turn it in. Do they identify it as a mystery refrigerant, even though nobody mixed anything with it?
No, the thing is that the quote-unquote purity of that refrigerant, it's still there, because the base components, even though,
Right.
like, this one escaped out at 40% rate, and this one escaped out at 7%
They
rate.
can put it back by
They can separate
remixing
the
with the
chemicals.
right.
Yeah, they can separate the chemicals and do what they need to do.
Yeah.
And I know it seems really weird, but if you think about pulling a vacuum, you're boiling off moisture, you're boiling. So they understand when they put certain chemicals under refrigerant at a certain pressure, where they're going to start to fractionate, where they start to separate. They understand all this. So they put them under certain pressures and different design conditions to pull them all apart. So again, that refrigerant is being put through scrubbers, being put back into systems again. You guys have been doing it for years, nobody knows it. And like I say, it's not a big deal, but all this refrigerant that everybody's recovering or bringing back, where does it go? You guys don't know. You just know that you bring back a tank and we send it off. That's all the more you know. But that's what happens to it on the back end. So, that's basically it in a nutshell as far as recovery. There is this chart basically gives you most refrigerants. Okay, so basically if you pick a refrigerant, so the top one, R12, if you have a 30-pound recovery cylinder, or if you have a 50-pound recovery cylinder, or a 125, those are your most common cylinder sizes for recovery. It tells you the maximum allowable charge for that tank. Now, if you have a 30-pounder, think about it. If you have a 30-pound R12, we give it to you brand new, you're getting 36 pounds, basically. Tare weight of the box, tare weight of the tank, plus the refrigerant, it's about 36 pounds. Might change a little bit on density or something like that on a given refrigerant, but about 36 pounds for a 30-pound can. So if you look at it, you go 27 pounds, why can't I put 30 in there? You know, I got the last few pounds in here, I'm just gonna slam it in there and be done with it, you know, I mean, you've already put 27 pounds in there, and you got 4 more pounds. You know, I'll just write down 27 pounds and nobody's none the wiser.
3%.
Well, the reason why is because, I mean, first on the back end of things, we trust you guys, to be honest with you. We trust you guys on what you bring back to us, by type of refrigerant you tell us it is. We trust you on the weight. We really don't try to double check you guys on weights. So we will use those weights. We write it up on a form, and that weight gets tabulated and sent to a trucking company. So what happens is that truck's got to go across the weight scale at some point in time. So we said our weight was 20,000 pounds, and that truck's coming up that it's 7,000 pounds overweight. Because you guys didn't give us the right amount. So these weights that are on this chart for whatever given refrigerant, for whatever given size cylinder, like you said, they're based on an 80% rule. The reason why is because, again, everybody just, hey, I got a couple pounds, I'm gonna slam it in there and be done with it, you know? So there's that fudge factor into it, to some extent. There's also scale inaccuracies. There's also some variations based on, you know, whether it's a Worthington cylinder, a Manchester, or an Amtrol tank. There's gonna be some variances in the weight. So we've kind of, as an industry standard, we've kind of gone to this rule. Now, from a DOT regulation, I'm gonna say this really tongue-in-cheek with you guys, because I've dealt with this, I've battled, and I've lost and I've won on both sides. So if you've got a 404 system, and you know that there's 100 pounds in there, and you've got a 125 recovery, and if you look at that chart, for 125 for 404, it's gonna tell you 80 pounds, 80% full of 100 pounds, which was the original charge. It's always based off the original charge of the cylinder. So if you buy a 125, what we call a 125, a big taller cylinder, a 404, again, a little fudge factor there. We've always just said 80%, the original charge would have been 100 pounds in that cylinder, so it'd be 80 pounds. Well, honestly, what's that?
What?
Yeah.
What did I say?
80% of 100, so if it's 125 pound, oh, that's water capacity.
No, and think of it again as in the size cylinder of that refrigerant. Even though we call it 125, doesn't mean in 404, there's 125 pounds in there.
No, the cylinder weighs something too.
Well, what I'm saying is, the charge of 404, the charge of 404 in that, let's just call it a tall cylinder. I don't want to confuse people and keep on saying 125. So let's just call it the tall, you know, 10-inch cylinder. For 404, every time you get it, it's gonna be 100 pounds of raw gas in there. Most of those taller cylinders weigh about 62 pounds. Again, manufacturers change, design of tank, all that kind of stuff, but we go off of 62 pounds. So that's gonna weigh 162 pounds.
But if it's R12, it's only up to 129 pounds.
Right, because the original charge was 125.
80 pounds come in.
Or
It's 80%.
125 or 145.
Of
100 pounds is 80%.
145 as well. 22 was 125. Some of these other, you know, there's ones out there that are 110. You know, trying to keep these numbers all straight and your guys' said, let alone ours, when we have to answer your questions when you call in, I mean, you see all the
So
different.
the same
refrigerants we deal
cylinder is
with.
different, you're saying the same cylinder is different for each brand?
Mhm.
You know,
I mean, 100 pounds on 404 is the same as 100 pounds on 410. You know, the weight, sheer weight of the gas is 100 pounds. There's nothing changing that.
Right. The 80% is gonna be a different number of pounds depending on the refrigerant.
Yeah. Well, again, it's gonna go off of the original cylinder charge. So if this one was a 100-pound cylinder of this particular gas A, and this one's 125 of gas B, your cylinder that you're allowed to charge it to is gonna change. And like I said, if you look on a given refrigerant, given cylinder size is gonna be there. What my point is this, okay? The DOT does not care what we say about 80% full. They just don't care. All they know is, for that given refrigerant, and again, using 404 as an example, that refrigerant cannot be net gas over 100 pounds. So, again, if you guys got 100 pounds in a system, you're recovering 404, you can put 100 pounds of gas in that cylinder. You don't have to get another cylinder that's, you know, a small cylinder and throw that additional 20 pounds into it. As long as it does not exceed the original weight of that taller cylinder, or of
what it's allowed to hold.
Yeah. So, again, like I said, I mean, given scale inaccuracies, people trying to finish up late on a Friday, all that fudge factor is kind of built into that chart, basically. So we try to adhere to it as much as possible. And if you're dealing with us for recovery, every tank we give you has a hang tag on it. You check off the refrigerant and you write the weight on it. Total gross cylinder. You put it on your scale, 61 pounds, check off 410, write 61, and you're done. You don't have to do anything else. Anywhere from with us, with United Refrigeration, dealing with national refrigerants, you're actually charged anywhere from $3 to $5 a pound.
You have to burn it, right?
Chemically burned, yeah. It's a chemical burn process, which basically nullifies
So
it.
it's 100 pounds of Freon, you're talking, and you added just one unit, that's $300 to $500 you're gonna be charged for.
Yeah.
Instead of,
I thought you just said they could separate the stuff.
They can, if it is all 407A,
Yeah.
if it's 407A, but in his example, he said, well, what if some escaped, but it's not, that system was not mixed and I recover it?
So it's fresh.
If it's that pure refrigerant not mixed with anything else, they can separate those base components.
Yeah.
They're just not gonna be able to separate other components that come together, because what ends up happening is,
22 and 12.
yeah, you start changing that mixture completely.
Okay.
You've got other components that will react differently with other components. And that's what your system is doing. You're having, one component react and boil off at a certain point in the condenser or evaporator versus another one. So your glide is all over the place. Your pressures are all over the place. So it's kind of a bad thing.
Regarding that 80%, years ago, I saw a video where they filled a refrigerant tank 100% completely full. And then when the temperature changed, the hydraulic pressure was 1,200, 1,500 pounds, and just blew that thing to kingdom come.
Yeah, and in fact, doing that process is actually how those cylinders are tested. They actually pressure them with water, they put them into a tank, and they run pressure into the tank. And they gotta run them up to a certain pressure based on that tank style. And as long as they don't rupture, they're good to go. They get recertified.
Another stamp.
Yeah. The only problem about recertification is, and just be careful, guys, there's one manufacturer, Amtrol, their recovery tanks, they're what they call a 5+5. They used to put a sticker on it. It was like a little triangle sticker. It said 5+5. Does anybody know what that meant?
No.
5 years, 5 years?
It was tested for 5, because the first certification goes for 5 years. You were allowed to test that cylinder one more time for 5 more years. So that cylinder life was 10 years. After 10 years, it needed to be destroyed. So, how many companies were doing that? Probably not many. They were just recertifying because they didn't know Amtrol had this really weird thing. I mean, if you're recertifying an Amtrol tank that is now 12 years old because it sat on somebody's shelf for 2 years after the 10 that had expired already, they're gonna recertify it. Now you're liable for that tank because it's in your possession. So just be really careful of what recovery cylinders you guys are getting. If they're Amtrols, if you have a choice of another tank, grab another tank. Unless you know that it's a fresh 5-year or the second 5-year. Ask for a different tank. Are Amtrol tanks really that popular anymore? It doesn't seem like it. But the other thing is United Refrigeration, all of our cylinders, all of our recovery cylinders, they're all gray. So everybody's used to, gray and yellow. It's gotta be gray and yellow. I mean, for the longest time, we have people.
What was with the yellow mesh stuff they used to come around?
Yeah,
It's
it's
just-
just orange, I think I had.
Well, number one, it's been yellow. Number one, it kind of signifies us, because not too many people are going out and buying that yellow netting. That's number one. Number two, it actually cushions the cylinders, so they're not banging together and the paint rubbing off. So it's actually saving National from having to recondition that cylinder from a paint step. So that's basically what it's all about. I mean, it's nothing more than that. But we can always tell our tank. If the mesh is on there, if you guys bring it back with a mesh, fine. If you bring it back without the mesh, we don't care. It doesn't matter.
It melts when you hit it with your torch.
It does.
That's a true fire to heat the tank up.
So, again, we can always tell our cylinder because they're all gray. It doesn't have to be gray and yellow. There's no regulation that says they have to be gray and yellow. So, if you get one from us and it's all gray, don't worry about it. We're gonna take it back. Now, if you start bringing back gray and yellow to us, we know they're not our tanks. And there's gonna be some regulations that go along with whether we're actually gonna take that tank back or not.
Like, is it in date still?
Is it in date? What did you pay for it? Because we know what we give you for a credit, because our cylinders are not sold, they're actually like rented or leased, if you will. So, we're gonna give you credit. United has looked at it and said, we're kinda done giving credits on cylinders that are not our cylinders. So you have a number of choices. You can either, like, turn the tank in, and you tell us, I want my cylinder back. That process could be anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months with us. There's no real set date on, this tank's gonna come back on this date, it's not gonna happen.
Right, is there a charge for it?
There's not a charge for it. Well, yes, there is a charge. If it's not our tank, there is a charge for it. If it is our tank, there's a charge for it, but they're charged different. Our tanks are built up front, so whether you bring it back empty or full, you've already paid the charge, you've already paid the fee. You're gonna get back the deposit of the cylinder coming back into you. If it's a gray and yellow and it came from another supplier, we're not gonna give you a cylinder credit, and we're gonna charge you the evacuation fee if you want it back. You can get the cylinder reconditioned if you like. You can have it hydrostatic tested if you like. And all those are charged to you, and you can have your cylinder back. If you just don't want the cylinder, like, I'm done with the cylinder, I don't want it anymore, you can have it. We'll actually pick the tank, and there's nothing billed to you, but there's nothing credited to you. So it becomes our possession then. And it ends up getting sprayed gray, it needs to be recertified, it gets done, if the valves are sticking, whatever, they'll go ahead and take care of all that. So, so the next thing is was there any questions on refrigerants and what's kind of going on, and any refrigerants you guys have questions about?
CO2?
Okay, 744. 744 is 2 cylinders. You get a liquid cylinder or a vapor cylinder. They have to be charged that way, either liquid or vapor. Depending on the type of system, you may use a heck of a lot more vapor than you will liquid.
Oh, yeah.
Some systems are kind of somewhat balanced. It depends on that manufacturer and how they're actually building those systems. It's a tall cylinder. It's 50 pounds of pure product in there. This cylinder probably weighs 200 pounds. It's got to be 200 pounds because the pressure you're dealing with, it's a thick walled, thick bottomed tank. They're very heavy. The problem with them right now is that very few systems out there running CO2, number one. So the amount of exposure that contractors are seeing are very limited. In our area, there's one Aldi's that I know of. I think there's 1 or 2 Walmarts and a Sam's Club that actually have them. So the problem with these cylinders is you're billed a deposit just like every other cylinder, tall, big cylinder going out the door. You're billed it. Because these things are limited supply, we want that tank back because we've got to go and get it filled because it's not that thinner tank that you guys are used to. It's a totally different tank. We need to get them refilled. So we had Walmart that would take the tanks, they'd go and fill it up, they'd leave the job. Then they'd call us a month later and go, hey, need some more gas. I don't have any. You took all my cylinders, but never brought them back. I don't have any. So what United started doing was, like, we ended up talking to Walmart and saying, listen, here's the problem. We're trying to keep these tanks here for you, but you guys are not bringing them back to us, which means we can't get them refilled. So here's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna start charging you the deposit, and everything over 30 days, we're gonna start charging you a fee for. So it goes to like, I think it's $50 a week, first week, 75, second week, third week becomes 100, and it just keeps on going and going and going. So the tanks are coming back to us, but problem is, honestly, and it's probably a bit of our fault as a company, we just don't have enough cylinders in the supply chain of things. I mean, we just had to give up our cylinders to a store up in Michigan because they took everything that they had and they needed more.
What do they do? They just leave it on the roof of Walmart?
They were leaving it in the back rooms, in the rack rooms.
The rack rooms.
Yeah.
Kroger.
They're just leaving back. And it's, you know, it's like, because that's what you normally did with a cylinder. You know what I mean? Unless you wanted to come back right away and get your, you know, cylinder deposit back.
How much does it weigh empty? 250 pounds? 50 pounds of
Those tanks are
product?
heavy. Like I say, the
Just
tanks
leave
are a
it there.
heavy tank.
I ain't putting that back on the truck.
You know, regular.
You can scrap that.
That's it. Well, that's what Walmart. It's like, hey, we're done with these cylinders. Come pick them up now. You know, so we've got that to contend with, and the problem is that they're not banded up together. They're just loose. Which, okay, fine, we can deal with that. But there's two over here, and oh yeah, there's two way over there somewhere. And oh yeah, there's like 5 down in the basement.
The employees aren't allowed to pick up more than 60 pounds?
Yeah.
You
So.
knock the top off and you get a.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. So CO2 is it's definitely making inroads into our business again. Europe, they've been doing CO2 for years now. I mean, they really have. When we were getting all the information on 407 as a gas that was going to be replacing 22, our company United had branch locations in the United Kingdom. And I was talking to one of the guys at one of the meetings, and he's like, "You guys are just doing 507 or 407 now?" I'm like, "Yeah, you know, it's new gas, aren't you guys?" He's like,
Do.
15 years it's been over here, you know. We're past that. We're on the CO2, and that was probably 15 years ago. So we're just starting to see CO2. I mean, we're so behind. But again, thinking back to that GWP number, that 150, when you got CO2 at 1 or 4, somewhere right in that range. I mean, it just fits that number perfectly, you know. So there's gonna be more systems coming out with it. The other thing that we get asked when we were talking about 290, you guys are seeing these 290 units out there. Is 290 gonna stay around? Yes and no. I mean, it's got some applications where it definitely makes sense for it to stick around, but there's also applications where it really, really doesn't. When you have, again, there's a chart in there for 513, that is a 134A replacement, which 290 is the new equipment replacement for 134A. 513 can replace 134A right into a unit. So you take the 134A out, put in the 513, you're done. Copeland actually was in, the rep from Copeland was in today, and I was asking him about it. And I said, "What are you guys seeing on 290? And he's like, "What do you want to know?" And I said, "Well, you know, my thought is that if you're a manufacturer, you're making a unit. If it's a 2-door unit, you've got 1 condenser sled on it. When it goes to a 3-door, or you've got an under counter that's like a 5-door, you've got to have 2 units on there because of the charge of 290. You cannot exceed 5.3 ounces in any one system."
That's right.
So answer this: if you're a manufacturer, you're manufacturer A, and manufacturer B over here was using 290, but they saw this 513. They know it can take the place of 134A, so they can buy a 134A condensing unit, and they're going to manufacture a 3-door or a 5-door with 1 unit, and you're still dealing with 290, and you got to have 2 units on there. What are you going to do as a manufacturer?
They're still
You're going to switch over. Now, the problem with that is this: as a manufacturer, the reason why 290 is here and it's around right now, as opposed to 513, is because 5 years ago, 7 years ago, whenever they knew 134A was going out, the only viable thing out there was 290. 513 had not been developed. So their choice was one choice, and they all had to go to it. So they had to retool, they had to change production lines, they had to change a lot of different things based on going to 290. So now you have your whole system revolving around 290, and 513 comes out. So now are you gonna retool again? Are you gonna start buying different compressors? And what's your thought process there? So manufacturers are really on the fence right now. I mean, they're really on the fence. I mean, from what they're telling us, I just talked to one of the engineers actually at True, and I asked him that very question. I said, what are you guys seeing? What are you guys doing? What are you thinking? He's like, well, our thought process right now is continue with 290 on everything that we can do in 290. And then anything that we can pump out that needs a second unit, if it were 290, we may seriously look at going with 513 and putting one unit on there. The problem with 513 is that GWP number, it's up there again.
You can't beat that 0.
You can't beat anything under 150, you know what I mean? Like 150 is that threshold that they want to get themselves to. So if it's, I think 513, actually I think, 513 is 631.
Oh, it's over 150.
So 513 is gonna be a small window. 290 has that longevity. So what are they doing now? Over in the UK, they're actually allowed up to like 10.7 ounces, I think it is, somewhere in that neighborhood. Don't quote me on it, but they're allowed up to that. We're only allowed 5.3. So these manufacturers are now petitioning the government, they're talking to their lawmakers and everything like that, and they're basically saying, hey, listen, we need to up this.
So their little fireball is a little bit bigger than
Yeah,
this.
it's gonna last 4 seconds instead of 2.5 now.
Nobody died yet, let's go a little bit higher.
Yeah, so that's what they're gonna do. I mean, so is 290 gonna stay around? Probably. I mean, honestly, I mean, really, really think about it, especially if they can get that pass where they can go to a higher rate. Right now, they're settling somewhere around a 7.5 mark. Now, what that does for them, size-wise, equipment-wise, compressing or condensing unit-wise, I don't know. It gives them.
How much is
It goes into the
5.3?
percentages of how many of what size they're selling.
How many ton is typically 5.3?
5.3 is probably,
3 cigarette lighters.
well,
Yeah, but
you're
tonnage-wise.
probably
I mean, what-
third plus, maybe teetering toward a half light, probably somewhere in that vicinity. I mean, your mainstay in those coolers are quarters and thirds.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll just run the hell out of them. That's all they're gonna do, so. So again, any questions on refrigerants or where we're going with any of that? So we still good on time, Tom? Okay.
However long you wanna take, Tom.
Okay, so next thing is oils. So we have mineral, you got alpha benzene, you got POE, and you got PVE. So mineral was all of the R22, 12, 502. So if we talk about oil for a minute, really quick, going back to R22 stuff, when you do a retrofit, everybody looks at making a retrofit from R22 to 407, if you will. They have problems with the systems. Supermarket guys noticed this immediately. The reason why they noticed it immediately was started having leaks on the systems. So if you don't know any better, your initial thought is this 407 stuff is garbage. All it does is create leaks. That's all it does. So for a while, people just didn't want to touch a lot of this retrofit stuff. And 407 was really like, supermarket guys were like, that stuff is garbage. We don't want any part of it. Well, they started doing testing. The testing that they ended up finding out was this. R22 will permeate a rubber gasket. So if you have a Schrader pin and it's got a rubber gasket on it, you have some sort of other valve in a system, solenoid valve of some kind maybe,
Yep.
Suction stop valve, some type of valve.
With
that
Teflon
might
too,
have,
or
I'm sorry?
permeates the Teflon too, or just the?
Not Teflon, rubber.
Rubber, O-ring.
Yeah, it does it to rubber. So it permeates it. Now, if you've got R22 in the system, everything is great. There's no problems. Because you have R22 pressing against those gaskets.
Swells it.
It swells the gasket, and it made a really good seal. On top of everything else, you really had very few leaks from traders unless they were over tightened or not tightened enough. You never had an R22 leak from a trader pin really. But you change over to 407, your first leak, trader pin. What happens is, and they've proven this, there's videos out there on the internet. National did testing on it, and basically, they took a gasket and they permeated it with 22. And they had it in a chamber that had R22 in it. They evacuate the chamber, the 22 is still in the gasket. If you watch these videos, you've got this gasket that all of a sudden you see outgas. So what outgassing does, it swells that gasket. Well, the rubber's only gonna take so much swelling. So what ends up happening is, it splits.
Oh, okay.
So if you change from 22 to 407, that gasket is gonna outgas. You're gonna end up with 407 in the system, that you have Schrader pins that are damaged now. So you're gonna leak from Schrader pins and, like I say, suction stop valves and some other type of valves that are out there. That is the problem with that. So if you guys do change from a 22 over to 407, again, compressor has to have, or the system has to have POE oil. Change your Schrader pins, plain and simple, no questions asked. Just change them out. So getting back to the oils, mineral oil, alkylbenzene, kind of thing of the past anymore. We really don't have to even worry about them. I mean, we sell some alkylbenzene every once in a great while. I mean, it's systems that have.
You're still recommending it as like an interim when you do your baselines to clean up the mineral oil before you switch over to POE, or?
Flush is what's recommended, really, because Flush does a better job than what alkylbenzene can do. Yeah, yeah. So really, what we're left with, and pretty much every compressor that you're buying today is coming with POE oil. So when we did refrigeration changeovers from 12 to 134A, or 134A required POE oil, there's a lot of things that were not known about what was going on. We didn't understand POE oil, we just knew we had to use it. So the first thing that happened, I was actually working for a wholesaler, and this happened. The POE actually, when it first was manufactured, came out in plastic jugs. Yeah, it would permeate the plastic, and we had actual jugs that were, straight wall, and after a year's worth of time being out there, they're plumped out. It sucks that much moisture. Yeah, yeah. When you get moisture in POE, it turns like a yellowish color. If you get more in there, it turns to a darkish. It'll actually end up going to a black before it's all said and done. It'll go from brown to green to dark greens. I mean, it looks like antifreeze at some point. I actually seen, we had a refrigeration guy that the company bought a building that had 2 racks in there, one medium temp, one low temp rack, both 404 units. I went there and dropped some stuff off the one day, and he was showing me the rack room. He had probably 35 baby food jars of oil. Every time he did an oil change, he would put some in a baby food in a jar. And you saw the progression of the colors.
Oh.
And it was really cool because, I mean, you actually seen every, every step where that oil was getting cleaned up. So, what we ended up finding out, and air conditioning guys found out, 10 years ago or whatever, when they started dealing, 15 years ago, when they started dealing with 410, was that everybody started rushing out and they had to have a new set of gauges for 410. Do you need a new set? Yeah, you do, because it's higher pressure. But can you take that same 410A set and go over to an R22 system? You can. Does not matter. The reason why is because
You don't have to cross-contaminate the oils. Did they get in the hoses?
No, has nothing to do with anything. No. Cross-contamination of oil is a factor, but it's only a factor at 26% mixture of mineral to POE. So if you get 26% roundabout, I mean, the number's really 25, but I'm saying, okay, you get 1 more percent. So you get 20%, 26% of mineral in a POE system, now you're gonna start to have some problems. Yeah. There is no problem. In fact, years ago, Hill found out that they were having oil return issues on their racks. And it was when they ended up redesigning the rack because of POE oil, what they ended up doing was they pulled out POE and put in mineral. And it was for oil
Less
return.
than 25%.
Yeah. You're talking, 20 gallons into a rack system or something like that, or, thereabouts. You're putting 1 gallon in. It's not a big deal. Now, can you use your hoses that's on that same 410 and go over to a 22? Yeah. Because you have so little, just trace amounts of oil. I mean, you would literally have to go from that 22 back to the 410 and back and back and back and back and just keep doing it to get anywhere close to 5%, let alone 25%. So the biggest concern of POE, does anybody know what the biggest concern of it is?
Moisture.
Why?
It's hygroscopic.
Okay, we know it's hygroscopic, but why is it a big deal?
Changes the chemistry.
It sucks the moisture out of the air, you got H2O, you got oxygen causes corrosion. And
Oxygen does, okay.
Oxygen's very reactive with just about anything. So once you get free oxygen in the system, it's gonna cause all kinds
Yeah,
of
there's definitely some of that going on. But it's actually how they make POE oil. POE oil, its base component is carbonic acid. They take carbonic acid, they put it under a pressure, and all the moisture gets extracted. Then they ended up adding other chemicals and surfactants that make it POE oil. So, if you start introducing moisture back into POE,
it releases the carbonic acid.
it wants to go back to carbonic acid. Because that's what it really knows. Because again, the base component, that majority of that component is carbonic acid. And again, we all know it loves moisture.
Steam condensate.
You use a pint, use a quart, use a gallon, and you get down to that bottom, pitch it. It's probably been opened enough that it's absorbed moisture that you really don't want in a system. You really don't want it there. So, again, POE going from a 22 or anything that could be mineral oil over to 410 or 513 or 448, 404. If you want to use that set of gauges, by all means use it. Just moisture is the biggest factor in all of it. Do not introduce moisture into a POE system, plain and simple. You're asking for problems.
How do you get rid of the oil? You say pitch it. How do you get rid of it?
I say pitch it because it's,
Yeah, I'm with you.
I'm telling you, pitch it. You know what I mean?
What do I do with it? Put it in the garage? I mean, what do you?
I wish I had the best answer for you. But I have zero answer. I mean, we brought it up to national, like, hey, listen,
It's still
we tell
flammable, right?
people,
Take it back to AutoZone and mix it in with your auto. I mean, because they got signs now too. If you've been there, it's only motor oil. In
Yeah,
some
you're
places,
introducing
when
something
you're
that-
out of the Cleveland area, you have to sign a paper stating that it's just motor oil. There's nothing else.
and are they
And I always
analyzing
thought
it?
of us guys for that.
Yeah, no, and are they analyzing it? I have no idea.
I think that they know when they get it back, it's a mixture that they don't.
It very well could be, and I mean, that's on them, because that's what they're doing, is taking it back, so, it's kind of like us, you know what I mean, but
I think it'll burn.
our
if you get it
audience
out.
is really
I
small.
mean, that's actually a decent idea, to throw it on a bonfire or whatever.
I don't know, I mean,
Cook with it. I don't
honestly,
know what it does to the air that you're breathing.
honestly, probably your best avenue is if there's any waste oil burners out there that anybody knows of, those guys. they'll take it.
Any kind of oil that's got refrigerant in it, I would not run it into a burner, because
But the thing is, if it's open, any refrigerant that's in that oil,
if it's
I mean, 'cause
somewhat
it's not-
clean,
it's-
it makes good bar oil.
There you go. Rub it on your cutting board, right?
Bar and chain.
But, so the other thing about POE oil is the first and foremost thing that it wants to do, besides lubricate, which is not the first thing that it really wants to do, it wants to clean. It is a really good cleaning solvent. Under the right conditions. So I'm not telling you, hey, that thing's dirty and rub POE oil, it's gonna come really clean. I'm not saying that.
Can we put a little bit of POE in the mineral oil system?
Yeah. Yeah, because most of the refrigerants, most all the refrigerants you're gonna deal with, well, okay, if it's 22, can you? Yeah. I mean,
R11's a good one.
why would you, yeah. Why would you want to though? You know, unless it's all you've got, you're just that little, you know, little bit low or something like that. Yeah, okay, fine. It's not really, it's gonna travel with the system. The refrigerant, if we look at it this way, the refrigerant, R22 actually plays well with mineral, alpha benzene, or POE. It's one of the few refrigerants that actually does that. Most all the new breeds of refrigerants, everything needs POE or PB. The reason behind it is because if you look at the charts, again, R22 being an HCFC versus 404 being an HFC, the extra carbon molecule, mineral oil loved it. It grabbed onto it. It would flow with the system because the refrigerant was just moving around in it. Didn't really even have to rely on any sort of velocity pushing it. It just grabbed onto the molecules and went around the system. POE oil does not really do that well. So because of these new breeds of refrigerants, being the HFCs, they had to come up with a new oil. So again, that's POE. It does adhere to the molecules of the HFC refrigerants, and it flows around the system. Like I said, it is a really good cleaner. So if you guys, if you're brazing a line and you know you really put some heat to it, you're not paying attention or whatever, and you see a lot of scale on the outside, you guys know that scale's on the inside of that pipe. POE is going to attack that. It will scrub it clean. So if it scrubs it clean, where does it go?
We got nothing to worry about.
It's in the system. Hopefully it's being caught by the dryer, if the dryer's the right size and it's not, you know, contaminated like crazy or whatever. So again,
But you
change your
don't have dry
dryers.
nitrogen when you're,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Dry nitrogen, I mean, when I first started in the business, I went to work for a guy that, you know, I had never seen dry nitrogen bled through a system.
Yeah.
And he did it, and I was like, what are you doing? You know, and he told me about it, and I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Go to work for another company, you know, a year and a half later,
We don't know nothing about it.
they don't do it. The vast majority of companies didn't years ago.
yeah.
It's really common practice in our day. I mean, it really is. Yeah, bubblers, you can do it through a bubbler or something like that. So, but the POE really wants to scrub. So one of the things that it's gonna end up doing is, it's gonna start to break down the stuff that it scrubs. It's gonna break it into fine, like, we'll call it like 40 micron or smaller particle. So what happens is, expansion valves and cap tubes especially, it'll plug them up. You cut a cap tube open on a 134A system that saw some heat, that didn't have the best brazing done on it, you cut it open somewhere in the middle and you start knocking it, it'll be like sand particles coming out of that thing. So, change, if you're doing a cap tube, and it's a 134A system, or a 404 system, or a 513, and you're doing some change the cap tube. It's really not gonna cost you that much more. I mean, even if you bought the OEM, it might cost you $40 for a cap tube. You know, I mean, we sell the vast majority of popular cap tube sizes, and even if it's not on one of those, there's charts that kind of tell you if you have this cap tube at this length, you know, you
You're
kind
talking
of
more like
intersect some charts.
refrigeration now, right? Small refrigeration?
Yeah, yeah.
And don't the new filter dryers come with dye in them?
I'm sorry, just what?
Come with leak detection dye in them already? Some of them?
What's coming with it? I'm sorry.
I've heard that leak detection dye built into the new filter dryers.
I have not seen that. I'm not saying it's.
I was told
it's
that,
not-
I was watching a guy do a refrigerator, and that's what he said, you know, they just standard, they change that out with the cap tube with the filter dryer, and
It may be, Sporlan as a company, we sell Sporlan, that's what I know. Sporlan does not have that. So.
Like the guys with the beads in the
But,
hair.
like I said, again, you're plugging up cap tubes because of that cleaning. So again, it wants to clean before it ever decides to lubricate.
Yeah.
And then, like I say, you start introducing moisture into it,
Saying the company.
it wants to go back to a carbonic acid. Carbonic acid is definitely not gonna lubricate anything, so you're locking up compressors, you're baking oil out of compressors, whatever it may end up being, it's just detrimental to a system. So, POE oil, we've kind of learned those things about it. So the new one that we're dealing with, and you've got some of these trainers around here, most of all these mini split systems, majority of them have gone to PVE oil. So PVE is polyvinyl ether. The nice thing about PVE oil versus POE is that PVE is a pure product. It's not manufactured from something and something else is added to it and all this other kind of stuff. It's not that way. PVE is a pure product. POE is what they call, I think it's nominoma or something, I forget the term. Yeah, there you go, sorry. So, basically, it's a made-up product. So PVE actually is better for a system. It's more expensive than POE. The reason why it's more expensive is because there's currently one manufacturer. That's it. So this person's getting this company's getting every bit of it. But they've got a patent on it. What'll end up happening is they'll end up either cross-licensing it to somebody else because they can't keep up, or there's money in cross-licensing, or the patent will run out and then everybody's gonna start having to break up whatever. That's all going to happen. So you've got PVE oil and these mini splits. Can you put POE in a PVE system? You don't really want to. Again, you're talking different oil. The viscosities may be the same, because if you look at the viscosities of PVE versus POE, they both may be a 32 viscosity, but they're different oil. So you don't want to mix those oils. You don't want to introduce mineral oil or alkylbenzene into a PVE system, because number one, the refrigerant doesn't require it, and it could be detrimental, really. I mean,
So the PVE doesn't like to mix with the other oil. So we back to separate gauges then for PVE systems?
no, not really, because again, the trace amounts that are in your
It's okay
hoses,
for a little bit.
it's so little that it has no real effect on the system. I mean, Daikin and Mitsubishi, I've asked both of their reps, and they're like, no, it's not an issue, it's not a problem. At least that we know of, it's not a problem. I mean, after it's been out in the field for 10 years and it's really had a problem, and you've taken gauges off 100 times, could it be a problem? No. But you're never really gonna know.
Along the same line, if you had all three oils, same viscosity, is there gonna be some way to know what the lubrication effect is gonna be on that compressor?
If you were to have all three oils in the system at the same time?
No, just one against the other ones. Are they gonna be identical?
POE and mineral, or maybe alky.
As far as viscosity and
Yeah,
lubricity
well, if you
factors
have,
on
yeah,
it?
if you have the lubrication factor with the viscosity, is it gonna have different temperatures that you're gonna see on the compressor, do you think?
Oil, as in far as temperature of breakdown, they're all really close to that same. I mean, that 250 threshold
Okay.
breaks down.
The problem is when you're running for a long time at 245,
Yeah.
250
Yeah.
degrees, if the discharge is where the bad stuff happens, usually right at the discharge.
Yeah, and honestly,
Then you might
the worst of them is POE. Because when it starts breaking down, it overbakes, it wants to separate, and it turns into the little sand.
There's still quite a significant difference in price though between a gallon of POE and a gallon of mineral, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking totally different process, totally different type of lubricity. Well, lubricities maybe, I mean, as long as it's lubricating, you're fine. I mean, that's what the compressor knows is, as long as it has lubricity, it keeps on rolling. So, I don't really think that's gonna be a factor. If you have, like Danfoss is kind of funky. We notice now that their compressors are coming out with, it's like, and I know this is gonna be wrong, so I apologize, but I'm just gonna call it like an SL 160 HS oil or something odd like that. So if you really look at a chart that breaks everything down, or you talk to Danfoss, they're basically using a 32 viscosity oil. At the end of the day, that's what they're using. So it's a standard POE oil. The only time you're really seeing any different viscosity oil with POE, there's a 68. 32 is the mainstay. 32 is pretty much accepted by just about everything out there. There is a 68. We're seeing those in some York, some Frick, and then Screw. That's where you're going to end up seeing these little bit different variants, especially that 68 viscosity oil. That's where you're going to see.
Train's still doing stuff with special oils with the additives and stuff, or did they get away from that?
I don't know. I mean, the thing is, train compressors a long time ago, when they were those big orange bomb with the rotolocks on them, Train never made those compressors. They were actually made by Manurop.
Yeah.
There's nothing special about them.
Nothing stops a man.
I did a 2-week training school at Copeland. They took us on a plant tour, and when we were walking around, we went into the section, and I mean, as far as you could see down this row, every compressor on this row was orange. And somebody's like, "Are those train compressors? I mean, that's a train color compressor, right?" And the guy standing there, he's like, "No, those are not train compressors." They have that agreement, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
Carrier, same thing. I mean, they have that agreement as well. If you look in Copeland, you guys don't have the Copeland app. There's a toolbox, Copeland toolbox. You guys, it is awesome. I mean, it really is. You can get it on if you're just online, you can get it. If you've got a smartphone, you can get it. It tells you every component, for the most part, within every compressor or condensing unit. It does cross-reference from old legacy models to new ones. It's got AE bulletins in there, so if you guys have questions on, DTC valves on a scroll low temp, it's going to have that bulletin in there. You can read anything you want. I mean, it's got everything. I was talking to the rep today, and I was actually telling them, like, thank you for actually making something that's worthwhile, because their previous thing that they had, it was called OPI, and it was horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like basically somebody scanned all their part sheets, and somehow or another, if it said relay, it got fed into a line that said relay, and it just, half the parts weren't there, half the condensing units weren't there. It was bad. But they worked really, really, really hard on this new Toolbox app, and honestly, it's fantastic. I love using it because it's pretty quick, it's pretty concise. It breaks down. The breakdown of things are really nice. The other thing that I love is on a Copeland model number. If you look at the model number, the last digits, and when I say digits, I mean number digits. Okay, they're going to have a number. That number tells you whether it was sold by a manufacturer, or if it was sold to a manufacturer, if it was sold on a condensing unit, if it was sold to a wholesaler. And then within that number, it gives you a breakdown, like it's a rotolock, suction and discharge. It came with a plug, and it had the mounting hardware. So if you guys don't know what you're looking at, it gives you the model breakdown, obviously, on the compressors, and it gives you that bill of material number. The bill of material number for us as a wholesaler is really hard sometimes, because up until this point where they really started publishing what they were, you had to call them, and you had to say, okay, I got a customer that's got a 103, bill of material, what can I give them? And they would look it up and they'd say, go to a 901. But they would never tell you what it is. They are finally actually giving us this information. And like to us, a 901 or an 801 or something like that, that number means sweat connection. That's what it means to me. With this bill of material now, Copeland isn't that consistent all the time. And we've been stung at times where we've given people a 901 compressor.
I think I'm going to do a rotolock and all of a sudden now I've gotta shut down the
Yeah.
fire suppression in the computer room because I'm
Yeah.
doing freezing.
Yeah. One of the other things that Copeland has run into, and we were talking about with the rep today, is that we've been through the efficiency standards of air conditioning. So in this area, north of Mason-Dixon, we had to do a 13 SEER. Down south, everything was 14 SEER. We've done that as air conditioning people. We understand that. Guess what? It's here in refrigeration now. They call it AWEF. AWEF. What it stands for, I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know. But basically what it means is there's a standard for efficiency on refrigeration now. So we as wholesalers, we have to adhere to this. Otherwise, we're liable. So today, prime example, get a customer that calls, and he's got what Copeland terms as an inline condensing unit. So it's just a smaller, like 3/4 horse condensing unit. It was on a walk-in. We cannot give him another M-line unit to replace that unit because it does not have the efficiency standard that the old ones do. The reason why is because these manufacturers, they want cheaper, 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 cheaper. That's all they want. Give it to us cheaper. We don't care what you gotta do. Make it cheaper, make it smaller, make it everything that we want. Copeland tries to do it
Can you
because
sell them a replacement compressor?
you can't sell them a replacement compressor.
You
But
can
if
get a
I-
replacement condenser fan?
You could basically rebuild the unit
Yeah.
and still be within compliancy because that original condensing unit is still technically there. The components of it, they fail at times. But if I'm to replace that condensing unit, I can't do it. The other problem was, this unit that he had, I said his unit was actually a 1 horse, even though it was termed as a 3/4. It was really a 1 horse. It was 115 volt. So in refrigeration, 115 1 horse, man, it's kind of a white elephant. It's
Holy cow.
really, really, really rare. So the problem is, when we start looking it up, there was no, the next series that is compliant, AWEF compliant, is what they call their F line. Their F line, every single unit they put out is 230, single or 3-phase, or 460. So now, what do?
Everywhere, oh yeah.
You gotta bring electricians in.
Gotta rewire it. And the thing is, I can't consciously, and I said this to the guy, I said, listen, if you're telling me this is a really large reach-in, that's on you. I can't sit here and question everything that comes across my desk or phone call and doubt everything. Like, I need pictures. No, it's not gonna happen. So,
The 230 compressors will work on 208 also?
yeah, 208, 230, yeah. Copeland did some stuff years ago, they've corrected it, where they had a straight 208 and a straight 230.
That was the old days.
Yeah, which they've gotten away from that. But, so, like I said, I mean, I told the guy, I said, I really don't know what you want me to do here, because I can't, in good faith, and trying to follow my company's guidelines, because the government has mandated to us, I can't really sell you this unit, and I don't really want to. But if you're going to understand the regulations now that I've told you, that basically say that the only way I can sell you an M-line unit and be in compliancy is that it's a reach-in and not a walk-in, and you now tell me it's a reach-in, so be it. I can't do anything
I'm
about it.
sorry, did I say walk-in?
Yeah, yeah. So
Jeez.
once guys really start to understand this whole
How can it be
thing.
a walk-in if my only cook is a WNPC?
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's, the guy started off saying, I have this evaporator coil, and he gives me a model number for a walk-in. So, I already know what he's
That's a
doing.
big reach in freeze.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, that's like part of the problem that we're dealing with now, which then circles back to availability, which we started off with. You know, again, as a wholesaler, man, I wish I had everything for you guys every time you called, but it's an improbability, first of all, and secondly, right now, with the way things are going, like I said, it's not gonna happen. It's just not gonna happen.
So never say you have a walk-in.
What's that?
Never say you have a walk-in, looking for a condensing unit.
Well, if it's an inline unit, don't tell me it's a walk-in. I'll put it that way. I can't say anything more than that. I don't know that it's a walk-in. And like I say, again, it's these energy efficiency ratings. You know, if you look at some of the compressors that Copeland has done, here's the other thing, okay? Any of those small fractional horsepower compressors, Copeland doesn't even make anymore. They haven't made them for years. Copeland owns a motor manufacturer called Nidec, US motor. They're two separate companies, but what they were doing was they basically ended up going to Embraco or / Aspera because they have an agreement on how they make compressors together. Copeland went to them and said, listen, we're really sick and tired of making all this fractional stuff. We want to concentrate on scroll and scroll only. So I'll tell you what, here's all of our models, here's all of our information. You guys do the cross-reference information. Tell us what models it is and we'll start buying those from you. We'll make your motors for you to go into them. They started doing it for years. They were so blatant about it that you could actually pull the Copeland label off and the Embraco number was underneath it. Because Embraco got lazy about pulling tags off compressors, they just started slapping Copeland's model numbers right over top of it. So a lot of them, if we didn't have a Copeland, be like, hey, pick on the tag a little bit and see if you can pull it, see if there's another label that says Embraco underneath and give me that number. Embraco is, and some of you guys might know the name, some of you don't, but they are the largest manufacturer of fractional horsepower compressors. Whether it's residential refrigerators or commercial condensing units, they're the largest manufacturer. They probably own 90% of that market.
Wow.
They probably own 95% of the 290 market. The problem is that because they're a manufacturer and they manufacture those compressors, and you may own Frigidaire or some, residential refrigerator company, you buy them by the hundreds of thousands of compressors. So what they'll do is they'll give it a special number, and because they have that agreement, we cannot get what that actually is. They will not give us that information. So like an Embraco, anything that's a G-line compressor, any model that starts with a G, it's OEM only, we cannot touch it, we can't get it. I called, I tried tricking them, I tried every trick in my arsenal that I can to try and get them to give me some numbers, and they just will not do it. So they're, like I say, fractional, they're the largest manufacturer you're gonna find. And they're pretty much dictating what a lot of these manufacturers put in. They're being mandated by the government to increase efficiency. So back 5-7 years ago, all of Copeland's bodies started to change. Some of them actually grew much larger. And you guys as technicians, you could not fit them physically in the spot anymore. And basically Copeland said, well, don't know what to tell you. It's the efficiency standards, can't do anything about it. So it created a lot of headaches. It still is. I mean, it still rears its ugly head, probably once a week at least, where, like somebody's giving me a legacy compressor. A lot of times I'll actually go through and I'll look up height and I'll say like, hey, your old one is this height, the new one is gonna be this, are you okay with that height?
In a refrigerator, that's usually no.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to make the inside box as big as possible, they took it right down to the
Yeah.
top of it.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. They're the ones pushing the manufacturer to make it smaller and cheaper. I mean, you guys are seeing more encapsulated pressure switches. You guys see more encapsulated pressure switches than you ever did. Why? Because they're better? Absolutely not. Because they're a lot cheaper. I mean, as a manufacturer.
Wasn't some of the 290 stuff driving that too, about the switches and everything had to be done, even though it's only a couple ounces?
It's got to be sparkless. So they're not putting.
So everything's enclosed more.
Yeah, yeah, and they're not putting those type of pressure switches and stuff like that on there. Yeah, you're just not gonna find they don't have that. They don't have that to them. But like I say, it's manufacturer. You know, I can buy this old trusty one that I can adjust pressure up and down. I can play around with a little bit and all that kind of stuff. That's gonna cost me $40. Or I can buy this one that screws on. It's got 2 wires.
$5.
And I don't have to set anything because it's already the pressure I told them. It cost me $5. See, manufacturers, they're all about making the cheapest thing they can. So, any questions on oils or anything that's kind of going on in the industry? Anything I can tell you as a wholesaler behind the counter for the years that I've been behind, what we like, what we don't like?
We could be here all night for that, right?
Yeah, call and say your name, please. Call and say your name and who you're with, like.
I'm gonna make up a name and a different phone number and ask if it's okay if I mix refrigerants.
Yeah.
Once a month.
Yeah, you can do that.
Figure out who
You can
it
do
is.
that.
Just
Yeah.
ask
We did
for
it all the
Wayne.
time anyway.
Ask for John or Wayne. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we get calls regularly from store owners, and we as a wholesaler, I mean, it really pisses me off. I mean, our number's out there, they can look it up on the internet. I mean, I'm not pissed at them for finding it, but when I tell them no, and they start questioning it, that's when it really starts to piss
Do you
me
have the fittings to help me make an adapter from the propane tank on my grill to my
Yeah.
house unit?
No, those ones are easy. Nope, don't do anything like that. Bye, click.
Eastland.
You know, I mean, we had, and our company is guilty of it. I mean, we actually had a guy that came in that, and this is truth, no lie. There's, if you know where we're at East 26th in St. Clair. Down the road, 55th in St. Clair, like 53rd in St. Clair, there's a Subway. I went there for lunch many times. You get to kind of notice some people. The one day, one of the guys that just made my sandwich last week come walking in, picking up a time clock. And it was done online. He ordered it online through our store. And it's like, who's putting this in for? I'm gonna do it. Are you a certified technician? No. Then, you know what? I'm gonna tell you something right now. If this thing is bad, out of the box, there's no warranty, you can't bring it back to me. Well, why? You know, and he sits there and wants to play the 50 question thing. And it comes down to, well, you guys let me fill out the application. We did. We allowed the guy to claim that he's got 5 Subways that he works
Do
on.
you still get your sandwiches from this guy?
Yeah, I was about to say.
No, I don't
But
actually.
he wants a warranty for free.
Do you wanna go in there and get your sandwich from that guy?
But the thing
He wants a
is,
warranty.
Here's some extra sauce.
through that process, me personally, I actually talked to the people that created the form for our company and what questions they ask about who they are as a contractor. And the old way it was, I mean, they could really go through and kind of fool it in a way that kind of made them sound as if they were contractors. You know, every state's a little different, and that's part of the problem that we had
I've
as a
seen that
company.
with other companies, new companies are doing stuff with, where they run you through a quiz just to make sure you're actually at least in the business, or at least gone to basic school.
Well, I'll tell you what, if I don't know who you are, and you're not saying things, I mean, we all know what, you know, pressure controls are called. If you're like, hey, I've got this thing that goes on a line that
Skinny line,
does
not
something,
fat.
and
Has wires
it's
on it.
copper, and, you know, like,
Yeah, the flux capacitor, that's
yeah,
it.
yeah. You know, it's like, but there's certain people that have heard certain things through contractors that come and service them. They've actually read a little bit on the internet. But I'm here to tell you, I'm here to protect you guys because you are guys that put the money in my pocket every single day. We, as in United Refrigeration, try to protect you every day, and it's really, really, really simple. Because when those people call, if I don't know who they are, the first question I ask, and I hope you guys understand this, if you've ever been asked,
Who are you?
or if you get asked, no. Who else do you buy from locally? Every one of you in it, Refrigeration Sales, Cleveland Hermetic, Johnstone, Robertson, you know, I mean, you guys are gonna know every single one of them.
Yeah.
These guys that try doing this stuff, they don't know any of them. You know, we had, today.
Home Depot, Lowe's.
Today, John took a call from a Flowerama trying to buy refrigerant. And he could not get it through the person's head that they cannot buy from us. So John turned around and asked them, okay, so you guys don't grow your own flowers. What wholesaler do you buy your flowers from? And they asked why. And John said, because I want to go buy them from you. I don't want to buy them from you. I want to buy from them because they're a lot cheaper. Well, you can't do it. You got to buy from us. So John said, yeah, that's the way we work. You have to buy from the person that actually installs the stuff, that does your service work. That's who you need to call. Have a good day. Click. So, but
HR will be calling on Monday.
Supplyhouse.com.
yeah, there's plenty of them out there. There's plenty of them that sell to anybody, and they just don't care. Like I said, I had a change where in Ohio, if you go on there, it asks for your state license number. And any state that has state license, they ask for that number now. And that'll disqualify anybody but a contractor. So, I got some shirts up here. I got more literature, more pens, that kind of thing. If you guys want to grab any of this stuff, if you have any more questions.
You might have said this at the beginning, but R22, what best replacement? I know there's no dropping, but something you could just at least pull everything out and put in.
If it's the old existing compressor using mineral, 422B. Yep.
You don't have that shirt. This one really is a penny grab for you.
R458. Yeah, like I say, if there's any more questions, you guys want any more of this literature, actually there's some screwdrivers up here too.
Yeah.
Didn't even see them at first, so I don't know.
So Ted, as a chapter, we'd like to present you with this for taking your time, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thank you guys, really, I appreciate your time.
You're gonna be down there for at least about 10 years, right?
Right now, it's probably looking at like 16. 16, you know? Yeah, it's been a pleasure to deal with a lot of you guys, and you know, maybe not you so much, Myron, but you know, me and Myron go back to when I started in the business actually, and probably Tom shortly thereafter too. Yeah, so, but I mean, I've seen so many contractors over the last 5 or 8 years start to retire, and it's like, I can't believe these guys are starting to retire now. You know, I mean, it's really like, they're not gonna come around anymore, you know? I mean, we just had a contractor that I've known for probably the last 15 or 20 years, and he just died of pancreatic cancer, and it's like,
Oh, that one goes quick.
yeah,
3 weeks, done.
yeah, he was like a month.
Yeah.
It was like a month. And I mean, I took that one personally hard myself because, I mean, the guy, he's just such a great guy. I mean, it's really hard losing a lot of